Perfect. So, good afternoon, all of you. So, yesterday we had looked at different pre-diagnostic procedures, like how it is being done, and also this assisted reproduction technology, where we were talking about, in general, if what we call as in vitro fertilization, and so on. So now moving forward, so one of the procedure that we had already looked at was the amniocentesis, right? So that is taking out the fluid from the amniotic cavity, like it is shown in this diagram, and then you analyze that those particular cells either for biochemical analysis, that is metabolic disorders, or for certain genetic abnormalities, that is your DNA or chromosomal analysis, and then based on that you decide what is the particular disease or disorder, if at all it is present with this particular baby. So that is the amniocentesis, and the second one that we are going to start today, that is called as chorionic villi sampling. Now, everyone knows what a chorion is, and you also probably remember the villi-like structure that is formed during the implantation stage, which is holding the chorion and the uh, endometrium cells together, that interdigitation, that finger-like projection holding onto each other. So that is the chorionic villi structure. So a small amount of fetal tissue is withdrawn from the chorionic villi of the placenta. It is not actually a fetal tissue, doesn't mean like it is taken out from the body of the fetus. Like this is not the tissue that we are taking. But let's say, where is the placenta? Is it shown here? Yeah, here, this purple color thing. So from there, like obviously there is the outermost layer beyond the amniotic cavity is the chorion, and from the placenta, which is next to the chorion, that part of tissue is taken, and again a very few cells are taken, not like a chunk of it, probably hardly a millimeter or 2 millimeter type of tissue is being taken out uh, by like with using a narrow catheter, by inserting it into the uterus through vagina to reach up to the placenta. So from the vaginal side, the catheter is inserted inside the uterus, and it until it will reach to the placenta, and then from there a small portion of the tissue is taken out, and then again these cells are cultured and they are used for karyotyping, that is identifying the chromosomal structure or abnormalities and the genes related to the metabolic disorder. So the rest of the portion will remain same, like this biochemical analysis and the cell culture. It just the type of cell that is being taken is different in this chorionic villi sampling. The advantages of this is it can be performed in as early stages, like 8th to 10th week of the fetal stage, while the earlier one, the amniocentesis, it is usually done in the at towards the end of first trimester. So that was the amniocentesis, and this is usually done in the earlier stages of the fetal development, that is within 8 to 10 week. Also, another reason of doing this is because in earlier case, the embryo in the first trimester is relatively smaller, so the amount of amniotic cavity, so let me go back to diagram, this cavity or this empty space may not be as uh, great compared to like how it is shown here. It can be very tiny, also depends on how is the arrangement of the fetus within the uterus. So it is best that through the vagina next to placenta, which is really closer to the opening of the uterus, and then it is best to take out this tissue, so that way also this CVS is better. Also, another disadvantage, which is rather the advantage for CVS and disadvantage for amniocentesis. In this case, you are taking out the amniotic fluid, which may have very less number of cells, right? And they may or may not be viable always. Like whatever fetal cells we are getting, though they are called as fetal skin cells later, because some of the skin cells they also come in this amniotic fluid, but not always the viability of the cell will be as good as like you are taking the live tissue. So that is when the chorionic villi sampling is better, which provides rapidly dividing cells with distinct chromosome. That is, these are living tissue that you are taking out. So obviously, they will provide rapidly dividing cells. The results of karyotyping, they are available within few hours, but this is the case with the amniocentesis as well, because karyotyping is same for whether you do it for amniotic fluid cells or the chorionic villi cells. Then thalassemia can be detected by this method. Now, like in earlier case, those skin cells, they may not really express because they are from the earlier stages. They may not have expressed those genes as of now. But in placental cells, because these are the living tissue and they are part of the placenta, so they are surely going to be much more expressive in terms of their genetic expression, and that is how the thalassemia can be detected. I hope you are aware of what is thalassemia, right, Pratham?
No, sir.
Okay, so anyone else? Does anyone know what thalassemia is? Akshay or Mansi or Pranavi?
No.
Okay, so thalassemia refers to the disorder of the blood where the oxygen carrying capacity is less of the RBCs. So that is the thalassemia, which is a genetically what you say, the genetic disorder where the hemoglobin structure is altered, and that is what will lead to this type of disorder. So that is thalassemia. So one of the point with this chorionic villi sampling is this is invasive, right? Invasive in the sense the catheter has to be inserted and might cause injury to the fetus or mother. So that is that then this becomes a disadvantage of this method. So instead, these cells can be collected from the mother's blood or the fetal cells. They are isolated using antibodies. So, for example, you take the blood from the mother's body and then identify the fetal cells using specific antibodies which are unique to the fetus as such. So, there are certain proteins which are expressed only during the embryonic stage. Mother is surely not at embryonic stage. So, whatever cells they are found in the blood of the mother, which are of embryonic stage, they will be of the fetus and they can be isolated using different techniques. So uh, that is the way through which we can avoid invasion of the uterus abscess, which otherwise could harm the fetus or even to the mother, because you are taking out a tissue by inserting a catheter. It might damage some other part. So that way, it is always safer to collect the cells from the blood of the mother. Uh, okay, and then the last two techniques, the ultrasonography, which is a very commonly used technique. It's nothing but the sound imaging, like using the sound waves, you detect the topographical map of the fetus, and that is what you see on the screen, which is then analyzed and studied. So it is used to determine general condition and position of the fetus in the womb and the amount of amniotic fluid in the amniotic sac. So all of these components, they can be studied by the sonography technique. Now, one important fact, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, during the, I guess, second month, yeah, second month, when the this endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm, they have already started forming the organogenesis. That is at the end of some time after the fertilization. So when these different organs they are formed, uh, they will also start forming the reproductive structure. So if it is a female child, it will form a notch as in a kind of cavity-like structure, which is ultimately going to become a vagina in that particular female child. Or if it is a male, then there is a little outgrowth, that is the penis structure, which is not a penis at that time, but it is going to become a penis structure later. So based on that particular structure, whether it is a notch like structure or whether it is an outgrowth like structure, the sex of the child can be determined. But again, this is usually done somewhere around, I guess, 14th week. That is after 2 months. No, yeah, correct. At the towards the end of third month. That is how this detection of the sex can be done. Like, but now it is banned, so obviously no one can do it. But in general, like just to be aware of it, how it is being done. So that was the process. So that is ultrasonography. Uh,
So,
yeah.
so like in ultrasonography, like they said they use sound to determine the condition and position of fetus. So does does it get reflected off the fetus or something?
Reflected as in the sound waves from the fetus?
Yeah. So how can they use sound? I mean, is it like the like it only reflects off hard things, right?
No, I didn't get it.
So how do they use sound to
Oh, you are
determine?
asking the mechanism of the sound wave. Uh, so, to the best of my knowledge, it is again they put the sound waves like through that whatever device they call, uh, and through the skin it can go inside towards the. Obviously, there are certain gels which are being used, which are kind of absorber or collector and so on. I don't know the detailed mechanism how it works, but then the sound waves are like thrown to the fetus, then they will come back, that will be received, and that topological kind of map is being prepared on the computer screen, which is more like a converting that signal into the topology, and then that is what you study as a sonography output.
Okay, so they can only, okay. So it's like a distance thing,
It is like a what?
like a distance thing. Like some parts the sound will come faster, some it later. So if it
Yeah,
comes faster, then it's a bump or something.
yes, that's what I would imagine. So, because means I had studied the sonography long back, I'm not aware of me. I don't remember the exact technique, but we all can look into it again sometime. But most likely, I feel that is the mechanism. So, but yeah, we will see it.
So what's the difference between sonography and ultrasonography?
It's nothing but sound waves and ultrasound waves, which are just two different frequencies.
Okay.
Just there is a little difference in terms of frequency. Again, I'm not aware of the what is the frequency, but sound wave comes much towards the larger what you say wavelength, and within that whole spectrum, one part is ultrasound and one is regular sound waves, something of that sort. So that on YouTube, you will find actually one video which is more of a hearing test, and you can only hear certain frequency, and you cannot hear other frequencies. So the frequency which is more on the lower side, that is the ultrasound frequency. Again, I don't know the number wise what exactly it is, but that's what I remember of. So that is the ultrasonography. Then the fetoscopy, which is nothing but so the fetus is viewed by the doctor directly, introducing a needle like thin tube containing a scope, that is nothing but a camera, into the uterus to detect any defects in the developing fetus. This is like you probably know endoscopy technique, like the tube camera is inserted into the body cavities. So in this case, it is again done through vagina, and then the at the tip of the tube there will be a camera which is attached, and that will capture all the pictures around the fetus, and then it will give us certain image of the fetus, and then we can check if there are any developmental defects, and this is done like a little few more times, so that we know the developmental progress of that fetus. But this technique is not really used. because it's again a kind of, you have to insert something within the mother's body, and which may not be really good technique. In case like some of the cases, the sonography and other kind of techniques, they are not really feasible. So in those cases only these techniques are used. So but what we are looking at, the overall prenatal diagnostics techniques that is being used widely. So that these are the four techniques. So that was, first one was amniocentesis, then the chorionic villi sampling, then ultrasonography and fetoscopy. That is the prenatal diagnosis. Any question in this whole topic as of now? Okay, so if no question, then I guess we will be moving to the last topic of this chapter, that is sexually transmitted diseases. Now I remember, Pratham, you had asked that question about what was it? Uh,
It was about HIV and gay sex. Like there
yeah.
are some rumors about that. So
Okay, so I guess I will go over some of the content and then we will talk about that at the end, but today itself. So again, I don't think I need to describe what the sexually transmitted diseases are as such, but they are usually transmitted through the sexual intercourse. If it does, sexual intercourse does not always mean the penetrative sex. That has to be very clear in your mind. It can also refer to other means of sexual contact, and that is what is referring to this sexual intercourse here. So diseases which are transmitted through the sexual intercourse with an infected person, that is called as, they collectively, all these diseases, they are called as STDs, or they are also called as venereal diseases, or also called as reproductive tract infections, RTIs. This term RTIs is not so commonly used because it is not only related, sorry, it's not only related to reproductive tract sometimes, though the infection might occur there, but it can spread to the other areas of the body. So this terminology is not widely used. More what is used is STDs. That is the common term. What are all those diseases? So gonorrhea, syphilis, chlamydiasis, and so on. So that we will see one by one all of these. And of course the HIV, which is most famous disorder or disease since really long now, and it leading to the AIDS finally. So these are the common examples of STDs. Usually there is a very high probability of these STDs happening between 15 to 24. Now I would like to change this number. It should be ideally 15 to 35 years of the age, because during that phase, like earlier days, the marriage used to happen little early, like somewhere around 25. Now the marriage itself has shifted to somewhere around 28 to 30 years of the age. So obviously, like, means having the casual sex or casual sexual intercourse, that proportion has it been like increased quite a lot. So then the obviously the age will also change. So what are those reasons that can cause this sexually transmitted disease? So obviously having sex with the unknown partner, or having multiple partners, it can lead to this sexually transmitted disease, so we should avoid it. That is one thing. uh, Another means of avoiding these STDs is use of condoms, or use specifically of the physical barriers as means of contraception. But male condom, using male using a condom, that is the best way of preventing this infection, especially again during the coitus, that is sexual intercourse with unknown person. And whenever there is a doubt, consult a doctor. So if at all, if there has been, like, even if it is a known partner, like whom someone is having a sexual intercourse with, in that case also, if there are any symptoms, any lesions or anything that is abnormal, one should consult a doctor. So these are the general ways how one can avoid sexually transmitted diseases. Uh, okay, so coming to the first uh, disease from this STD, that is syphilis. Now, this syphilis is caused by this spirochete bacterium. Its name is Treponema pallidum. Spirochete is nothing but a bacteria which has a spiral shape. That is what is called as spirochete. So, if you remember that classification, Staphylococcus or Streptococcus, one which was rod shaped, one which was, or Bacillus, or the round shape. So, all those were the shapes, and based on those shapes, bacteria were classified. So, spirochete is that category of bacteria who has spiral shape. And the name of the bacteria is Treponema pallidum. Now, these pathogens, they usually enter the body through the tissues that line the rectum, that is around the anus or vagina or nose. Through these tissues, which are more external opening of the body, that's where they enter through. And again, the means of transmission is sexual. So, obviously, you would wonder how they reach to these parts. So the stages of syphilis, there are like three main stages. In the primary syphilis, one of the first signs that occurs is 4 weeks after infection. And this period is usually called as incubation period. Like in case of corona, we call that first 3 days as an incubation period. And after 3 days or 5th day, we start getting the symptoms of corona. So in the case of the syphilis bacteria, this infection or this incubation period is 3 to 4 weeks, and then the first sign starts occurring. It begins as painless open sores. Sores, you would know, like we have mouth sores and so on. That is like just a blister like thing, not a blister actually, but kind of wounded blister. So they will start occurring, which is called as cankry, and it is often found in the mouth. So in the mouth, if you see this, could be a sign of syphilis. That doesn't mean every time everyone has syphilis. If they have this open mouth sores, or around the anus or any of the genitals, like again vagina or any other part of the genitals, and normally caused by the direct contact with an infected person, that is through the sexual activity, which is the direct contact. And then this primary syphilis, then which will enter into the secondary syphilis, that is sore throat, skin rashes, the other symptoms start appearing. And yeah,
so like it doesn't have to be through sexual intercourse, right? I mean, if a person is infected and if you touch that person and if you touch yourself, then you're infected. Is it?
So a handshake will not cause syphilis. Yeah, that's what the question is, right?
Well, okay. So like if the person had touched their nose and it's in their hand and now you touch their hand,
So
then
most
you get and then you touch your nose.
got it. So what usually happens is this what you say, these bacteria, they are also somewhat tissue specific. They cannot infect the skin directly, because uh, like usually they have different layers of protection. This internal lining, sorry, of the nose or of the vagina or of the anus, they are little more what do we say, highly vascular structure, and they are relatively open in terms of their epithelium. So when the bacteria comes in contact with these cells, there is a quite high chance that these bacteria will stick to those cells and they will multiply there. On contrary, if it is with skin or some other like body parts, which is more external, like legs and so on, there this bacteria may not go. So in your case, like what you are saying, like if someone has that infection and then he is touching or when he is shaking hand with each other and then you touch to your nose, chance is still less likely, but possibility it can possibly it can happen sometimes. Depends on what is the bacterial load that you are carrying with your hand, which you are touching the nose and so on. So there are all those factors as well. Usually it does not happen that way. Yeah. So that's you understood it, right?
Yes, sir.
So then the secondary syphilis, which is just nothing but the stage which is higher bacterial load in the body, it will start showing more and more symptoms, which are like sore throat, skin rashes, and the rashes will also start appearing on the palms and soles or any other part of the body, and other symptoms like headache, swollen limb. If any of these terminologies they are not clear to you, please stop and ask me. But I would assume like headache, you surely know. Swollen lymph gland. So usually these lymph glands, we have so many lymph nodes in our body. So the common ones that you know are the tonsils, or under the armpit we have lymph gland, or the parotid gland, which is right below the ear. So these are all lymph nodes. Now, the most common, like the first one to show the swollen lymph gland structure is the groin one, because obviously genitals, they are very close to the pelvic area, and the groin has one type of lymph nodes, and they will get swollen. So that is one of the symptom. Then fatigue, which is tiredness, fever, and aching joints. So these are few symptoms in the secondary stage of the syphilis. And in the latent syphilis, after the rashes they will disappear, there will be a period where there are no symptoms, and that is called as hidden stage, which is the case with most of the bacteria and viruses. That means they go into dormant stage, or what is also called as latent stage, where bacteria is present but they are no more active, they are no more dividing, they are just present in the dormant stage. And probably this you will get to learn if you have some microbiology topic, or you can google it out, how does the bacteria stay in the
So,
dormant. Yeah.
this can it also happen to viruses like corona?
Dormancy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, it does. So we'll come to that. I guess herpes simplex is one of the common example that we know of,
So
which is one of.
if you get corona and then you're like you are healed, and then after some time you can again get because you weren't really healed.
With corona, the situation would be different because it depends on what type of virus it is. So usually with RNA viruses, I don't know. I guess it should be possible actually. Yeah, I guess it should be possible. But then usually what uh, your body does is it will clear out all the viral particles, and or the antibody, they are so strong that, or they are so specific that they will clear out each and every viral particle, and they will not allow any of these, even the dormant viruses, to stay in the body. So in those cases, then the bacteria may not, or the virus may not stay in the body at all. I'm not sure of the corona case if that is possible or not, but like theoretically it is possible in general case of the virus. So there is this hidden stage where there are no symptoms, and even if the symptoms go away, the syphilis infection is still present in the body, and it can start damaging the inner organs in the later part, and this stage may last up to 5 to 20 years, like until and unless you continuously take the medication and you clear out whole of the syphilis infection. So that way then this infection may not occur at all, but otherwise it will be present. And the last stage, that is the tertiary syphilis, where the like it can occur after years, like after the initial infection, and as this could be life threatening, and also could cause serious health problem like permanent blindness or deafness or mental illness, because then the level of bacteria has reached in a body to that extent that it has affected almost all the tissues in your body, and that is what this stage is of the syphilis, and then it will cause destruction of the tissues and so on. Yeah. So these are the general symptoms depending on the level of syphilis. Transmission, we already spoke of. You want to ask something?
Oh, yes. So let's just suppose that when you were young, like you didn't know all this, you were young, like 5 years old, and you got this.
Hmm.
Like you got rashes or something, and you wouldn't really know, you were a kid, that it's some disease, and then it went away. So after you grow up, after you become 25 or something, then you suddenly die. Like, and even if you do a checkup, this phallus is in the dormant stage, so it's not actually doing anything. So there might be a chance that it might not be detected. So you can't really do anything.
Yeah, so usually that does happen, but again these cases are very rare, because like if you remember, our body still has a very good defense mechanism. So in rare of the cases that this situation occur, that the infection has been there in since the childhood, and it might even go up to the lifetime. Yeah, that is quite possible. But the body's defense system is so good that it will not allow that infection to reoccur. It will allow the virus to stay in the body, because virus will be in dormant stage, which is like kind of hidden stage, and the what we say, the antibodies or the uh, immune cells, they may not recognize these viruses or bacteria at first sight, and it will keep on going for long lasting phase of life, until and unless the viruses comes out into the blood and so on, or infect larger tissue area. Then only these immune cells will become more and more active, and they will kill it. But otherwise, these situations of having infection and going on for like till the adult stage, that is a rare chance as such.
So, but like this is one disease, right? There are like thousands of diseases.
Correct.
After every 5 years, you should go and have a like a checkup or something, that if there's some hidden dormant thing. But how is it detected?
Ideally, yes, we should all do that. But again, until and unless the symptoms are not shown, people usually don't do this, which is called as diagnostic. We are not more diagnostic people, rather we are more of uh, treatment people. Like only after having a particular disease or disorder, we will go to a doctor. Very few of us within India, we go to a doctor for diagnostic purposes. So that
So,
is
but like, how will the doctor also detect? Like, the virus is in the dormant stage, right?
sorry, how?
So, but like, is it possible to detect it like through artificial means if
Yeah,
the virus is in a dormant stage?
very much possible, because those antibodies or those what we say, RNA, they are present in the blood system then, if at all they are present.
So, but like you said that like sometimes if the virus is in the dormant stage, the body might not even detect it,
Yeah,
right?
but then
So it
dormant
won't
stage
take
doesn't mean that the all the viruses, they are hidden at one place. They might be broken down into components, and then they are released out from the body, like through the excretion processes.
so some virus particles will be
Yeah,
there in the blood always.
correct. Or like for example, like if it is a corona like case, then you take a sample from the nose, or the vaginal cotton swab, or the anal cotton swab. So all these samplings can be done, and they can be simultaneously analyzed for the presence of antibodies for these virus.
So like people die of old age, suddenly one night they die. Is it because that one of these diseases, like gets them, like they got the disease when they're young and now they're
That's
old?
what I said. Like usually, that is a very rare chance nowadays, because when we are a kid itself, we get antibodies for most of these diseases, right? For most of these, I'm not saying for everything that we are studying here, but for most of the diseases, we do get vaccines. Like there are several of the vaccines that we get when we are just the baby, and so most of the infections, they do not occur. Even if they occur, they are being taken care of by the body. And even if there is a viral or bacterial load, the immune cells will keep that load below the infection level. So that is quite possible. But then having a death like situation because of these particular diseases is again a rare thing.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so the transmission we had looked at, that is through a sexual contact, and in most of the like sexually transmitted diseases, they can also happen by the infected mother to the newborn children. Yeah, So that is also a possibility. Incubation period usually is 9 to 10 days. Like since after that we should start the treatment, and the available treatment that we know of is the penicillin or tetracycline like molecules, and they are usually used. You might have heard of a very famous combination of penicillin, that is ampicillin is one of the other type of penicillin which is commonly used, or amoxicillin, the tablet with name Amox, or Penam. All of these are the brand names, and you can find penicillin as a content inside them. And
So,
tetracycline has like doxycycline or amoxicillin again. So these are the compounds which are present in the tetracycline category. Yes.
uh, like the drugs that are there, so do they only work on active viruses, or do they all like work on active and dormant both?
Depends on what is the mechanism. So if the mechanism is binding a particular structure within the bacteria or virus, so for example, bacterial cell wall has that lipopolysaccharide, right? And if the drug is going to go and bind to this lipopolysaccharide, then it will kill whether the virus or bacteria is active or dormant, right? Irrespective of that. But let's say bacteria, sorry, not the bacteria, the drug molecule acts on the actively dividing viruses, especially on certain enzymes, like for example, the one which are involved in RNA synthesis and so on, which are the sign of actively dividing viruses or bacteria. So if these drugs are acting on them, then they will only kill the living ones and not the dormant ones. So it depends on what drugs we are using. So that way, usually what a physician or a doctor do is they give combination of both of these, one which will kill living and the one which will kill the dormant one. So all the problems they are being solved.
Okay.
So usually penicillin is considered to be what is called as what was that, low spectrum, no, narrow spectrum, no, broad spectrum antibiotic. Broad spectrum means it is responsible for killing quite a few bacteria in one go. And tetracycline is even higher version of penicillin. Like chemically they are drastically different, but action wise penicillin is a little lower, but tetracycline is at much higher level in terms of killing bacteria. Okay, so that is the syphilis. Second disorder is gonorrhea. Again, this is caused by a bacteria named Neisseria gonorrhoeae, and this bacteria will rapidly uh, germinate into the mucous membranes of the body. Again, something like vaginal membrane or so. These are the like present again in the semen and the vaginal fluid of the infected person, and then if they are having sexual intercourse with the healthy individual, they will transfer it, because obviously there is a transfer of fluids across the bodies, and this this bacteria will also get transferred. Symptoms, most of the symptoms in these cases they remain same. They differ slightly, and based on the testing or based on specific like identifying symptoms, these diseases are segregated. So for example, in this case there is this pus containing discharge which is released either through vagina or through penis, pain over genitalia because of these sore formation. These genital the genital structures, they will have lot more pain. Burning during urination, again whether it's a male or female, this will be like the symptom, that is of burning. And the reason being because mucous membrane is completely inflamed because of the presence of this bacteria. So this inflamed membrane, mucous membrane, when the urine is passing through those structure, it has quite a lot of chemical molecules in the urine, so obviously it will give burning sensation. So that is the general cause of this. And it can also lead to arthritis or eye infection kind of diseases if it is spread all over the body. Usually when we talk of these sexually transmitted diseases, at first they are restricted to the reproductive structures, and later on if the infection is not cured, then they spread onto the other parts and then they can lead to different symptoms. Again, transmission, sexual contact, or using the common toilets and undergarments. Again, I don't know, like, but this is a quite common problem, especially in India, where the toilets, they are not so clean. And I'm not talking about the toilets in the house, but the public ones. Even in the school like setup, toilets may or may not be so clean. So we should always take care of trying to minimize the contact of our whole of the reproductive structure, or even the what we say, below the thigh, below the belt and above the thigh area, to minimum possible extent. And that way we can avoid these uh, different disorders or diseases. And the treatment is again penicillin like compound, which is, like I said, it's a broad spectrum antibiotic, so it works for most of the bacteria. So that is gonorrhea. I will talk about only few of these because these are again just the factual things. There is nothing more to explain. I will talk about AIDS and then we will see which ones we can take. So AIDS is the full form is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. That means it is acquired. That means it is the effect of something, that is the infection, and it causes the immune deficiency. That means in our body, the T lymphocytes or the immune cells, they are getting affected. So our immunity goes very low. So that is the AIDS. And this is caused by the virus which is known as HIV, that is human immunodeficiency virus. There are various types of HIV which have been identified, and it is said that this disease came to human from the particular breed of chimpanzee. So I guess some human obviously would have tried to sexually contact the chimpanzee, and through that it has transferred to the human being, and then it has been spreading since then. There are quite a few cases of HIV around, around in the sense, not around us, but in general around the world. So that way it is really spreading.
So,
Yeah.
is there a vaccine or something for?
Voice is gone, Pratham.
Sir, is there a vaccine for this?
No, there is no complete cure to HIV even till date. There are medicines which are acting positively, but a complete cure, what we call like a vaccine also, it is not there. The reason being, again, the HIV virus is mutating very fast.
Okay, so like for one generation, like people do controlled copulation, then they kind of disappear.
Sorry, controlled what?
So like for one generation, they don't have sex for recreation, like only controlled, like only for like giving birth. So it'll kind of disappear. Is it like that?
So what? Ideally, yes, but no one is going to refrain from having a sexual intercourse. That is like a fact, because for human it is a medium of pleasure, right? Reproduction is secondary for human. It's more like a means of having the pleasure, and that way then it is very difficult to, by the way what you are saying. But yeah, technically it is possible, but it is not, no one is going to follow it as such. Okay, so in this condition, actually acquired the again, in this case, most important fact is people don't die of AIDS. People die of the diseases which are caused during the AIDS phase, because our body's immunity is so low because of this virus. Then I can also get a tuberculosis infection, or I can get any other viral or bacterial infection, and my body is not being able to tackle that infection. Then I will die of that infection. So usually a human being does not die of HIV, of AIDS, but it dies of a secondary infection which is happening after the HIV infection.
Huh. Like, isn't there another way? Like, for example, like corona is going on, right? So people who have HIV, they have a very high chance of dying because
yeah.
if people don't have recreational sex for a month, there's a good chance that like almost all the HIV people will die.
Not really. So because that's when I said there are quite a few good drugs available these days. So usually nowadays the what we say, the what is that term called as, uh, people can live longer with these medications. So that is quite possible nowadays.
Okay, okay.
And also the most important thing, who has joined, most important thing is, uh, uh, people usually, in case of corona directly infects the lung, right? HIV, it's more of a blood disease, right? Because it is affecting those cells, which are WBCs or T lymphocytes, and they are being affected. So ultimately the whole body is affected, and the whole body's immunity is like down. So that way the AIDS works. So in this condition, the person's immune system becomes too weak to fight any kind of infection or disease, and that's when I said people don't die of the AIDS, but they die of the secondary infection because their immunity is super low. Symptoms again, fever, lethargy. Lethargy is again a fatigue. Uh, Pharyngitis, inflammation of the pharynx, weight loss, nausea, headache, rashes, and so on. Now, since HIV attacks, that human immunodeficiency virus attacks the helper T lymphocyte, the patient gets immune deficient. So this virus will multiply inside T lymphocyte, and it will break open all the T lymphocyte, and then that way there will be very few T lymphocytes which are left. So obviously the immune reaction of the body or immune system of the body is becoming deficient, and then ultimately the person becomes susceptible to various infection. Transmission, again any body fluid transmission, like especially the blood, semen, or vaginal fluid, or of course the sexual contact. These are the ones. AIDS usually cannot get transmitted through saliva, like that is the common assumption the moment we say body fluid. Usually when the people kiss each other during the sexual acts, there is a transfer of saliva, but through that AIDS does not happen until and unless there are open wounds in the mouth, like for example oral ulcer, and then they are kissing with each other. There is a chance of this HIV getting transmitted, but otherwise normal healthy adult oral mucosa does not transfer HIV virus. But all the other body fluids, they will be able to transfer. Again, no sweat as well. Sweat will also not transfer the HIV. So that way, this AIDS will be like it's only related to blood and the other fluids. Treatment, there is actually no cure as such, but one of the major treatment that is being followed with AIDS or the HIV infection is called as antiretroviral therapy. Now, HIV is a retrovirus, and that is why it is antiretroviral therapy, which is short form as ART. Uh, Again, like I mentioned earlier, there are so many mutants of this HIV, and that is when it has been difficult to produce an antibody. And again, those antibody has to be like they should be able to be formulated into a particular product, either injection or a tablet or whatever that means of putting it inside the human body, and that has not been able like that has not happened as of now. So that is why there are no vaccines. But these drugs, which are called as nucleoside reverse transcriptase, which prevent the transcription process of the virus, then which are called as NRTIs or non-nucleoside analogs. These are like nucleosides, like they have this what is nitrogenous base and sugar molecule, and the phosphate, that is nucleotide. Without phosphate, it is nucleoside, and so on. So those analogs, they are called as NRTIs, and the ones which are not resembling to that structure, they are non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor. They do the same function, both of these NNRTIs and NRTIs, short form. These, they will prevent the reverse transcription process of the RNA to DNA, and that way they will stop the infection. Otherwise, there are protease inhibitor which blocks certain processes in the virus so that virus particle is not able to integrate, or integrase inhibitors. Again, integrase is one of the major enzyme where DNA is integrated into some other cells. That is how the virus multiply. Virus will pass on its genetic material to the host cell. It will integrate its DNA and then it will replicate, and so the new virus particle is synthesized from that replication process. So that process is inhibited. PrEP medication, it is prophylactic. What was the EP? I forgot. I forgot the, but it is the prophylaxis. That means you know that you have a chance of having this HIV infection, so you do some medication beforehand. That is what is prophylaxis, and that type of medication comes here in this PrEP. So that is the kind of treatment which is available so far. One of the most important drug that has been designed, like I guess it is still a very recent could be like 20 years or 15 years back, which is called as nevirapine, and this has been successfully used to prevent the transmission of HIV from mother to child. So if the mother has HIV, and of course she didn't know that she has conceived a baby and she has HIV, either of these facts, and she produces a child, there is a high chance that baby can be survived without any HIV infection being carried to it. So this drug is working in that aspect. Yes. Your voice is gone, Pratham.
Yes, like I totally forgot. I'll ask you later. I forgot what I was about to ask. Oh yeah, so like you said that the body has many like different pathways, right? So isn't like there's so many types of white blood cells? Aren't there some that can take the place of like helper T lymphocytes?
So like even though helper T lymphocytes, their place is being taken care of, this viral load is so much that it will infect the other cells as well, right? And these are the major antibody producing or inflammation producing cell. That is that immune reaction happens through T cell, and that is why the moment they are affected, in any which ways your body's immune system has fallen down. So that does not really help them.
Okay.
So that way it does not really help much. Even if there have been certain experiments which are being done, like transfusion of lymphocytes into this body, which has certain reactions towards the HIV virus. So the moment it comes in contact with HIV virus, it will try to kill the virus, but that has again not been successful so far. There are various ways which have been tried. Actually, I should share one of the article which enlists all the possible treatments for HIV. There are various names of the drugs also which are mentioned in your textbooks. I deliberately did not put them because they are of no use. Like if I say zidovudine is used for HIV infection, or azidovudine is used for HIV infection. So that does not really help just by knowing the name. So that's when I did not include that in these slides. Most important thing that we should know is this nevirapine, which will prevent the infection of HIV from mother to the child. So that is one thing for sure we know. Okay, I guess the time is already up.